The night had no stars over the rail yard of castle, only the dim lantern swaying in the cold wind and the smell of coal dust and rain that turned the gravel to mud, the kind that clung to boots and never let go. The train sat silent, heavy beasts of iron and smoke, lined like waiting soldiers, each one breathing faint puffs of steam as if alive. Somewhere down the platform, a whistle blew, sharp and lonely, and the echo rolled through the fog like a ghost unsure of where to go. Hauptmann Otto Weiss stood by the tracks with his gloved hands clasped behind his back, his cap pulled low against the drizzle. His breath rose in faint white ribbons, dissolving into the dark. The orders had come that afternoon, sealed and brief. He was to oversee a special transport bound east. No details given. Just a schedule, a manifest number, and a warning, strict secrecy. Otto had seen enough of the war to know what that meant. But knowing and admitting were not the same. He had once loved the rhythm of the rails, the hum beneath his feet as a train gathered speed, the way the world blurred past and distances collapsed. He had been a railway man long before the uniform, before the Reich's banners draped the stations and the air smelled of fear more than smoke. His father had driven freight across the same lines before the Great War. The trains had been his inheritance, not the ideology that came later. Yet here he was, watching one such engine cough to life under the command of men with rifles. He heard footsteps behind him and turned to see Feldwebel Kramer approaching, a stocky man with eyes like cold nails. He saluted stiffly and spoke over the wind. "All in order, sir. Cargo loaded, guards posted." Otto nodded, though his gaze stayed fixed on the black shape of the train. "Manifest?" Kramer handed over a clipboard wrapped in oilskin. Otto flipped it open beneath the flickering lantern light. The entries were vague, the handwriting official and detached. Transport 47B, destination, East. Contents, special detainees. The words sat heavy on the page, refusing to explain themselves. Otto felt a chill deeper than the rain. He had heard rumors, whispers carried through canteens and letters that never reached their destination. Special transports. Camps in the East. Words like processing and resettlement. But no one ever said what that truly meant, and those who asked didn't ask twice. Kramer shifted uncomfortably. "They say it's routine, sir. Refugees maybe." Otto looked at him, his jaw tight. "Routine, yes." The word tasted bitter. "We depart at midnight." "Ja, Hauptmann." The Feldwebel hesitated, then gestured toward the third car from the front. "One of the guards says he heard singing." "From inside." Otto's eyes flickered toward the line of sealed boxcars, their narrow vents dripping condensation. "Singing?" "Yes, sir. Like a lullaby. In another language." The rain intensified, a soft hiss on the metal roofs, and for a long moment neither man spoke. Then Otto said quietly, "See that they are kept quiet. No noise after we depart." Kramer saluted and walked away. Otto stayed where he was, listening. Somewhere under the wind and the hiss of steam, he thought he heard it too, a faint, wavering melody that carried through the cracks, human and fragile, like a memory that refused to die. He turned toward the small operations shack beside the track, its windows glowing with yellow lamplight. Inside, a young dispatcher named Emil sat hunched over a telegraph, his uniform too big for his thin frame. The boy straightened when Otto entered, snapping to attention. "At ease," Otto said, shaking the rain from his coat. The room smelled of damp wood and ink. A small stove flickered in the corner, offering the illusion of warmth. "Signal received from Berlin, sir," Emil said, holding out a message strip. "Confirmation to proceed. No stops until Gorlitz." Otto read the words without expression, then folded the paper carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "Understood." The boy hesitated. "Sir, if I may ask, what are we transporting?" Otto met his eyes. The boy couldn't have been older than 19, maybe 20, the same age as Otto's son would have been if he had lived past Stalingrad. "You may not," Otto said, not unkindly. "Go home, Emil. You have done your part." The boy nodded, uncertain, and left into the rain. Otto stared at the telegraph machine, its brass key gleaming in the lamplight. A faint tick came from it now and then, as if something still tried to speak through the static. Midnight came like a breath held too long. The signalman waved his flag, and the engine roared, coughing smoke into the night. The wheels began to turn, screeching at first, then finding rhythm. Otto climbed into the lead car beside the engineer, an old man with trembling hands and eyes that refused to meet his. "Ready, Herr Hauptmann?" the man asked, voice hoarse. "As ready as one can be," Otto murmured. The train pulled out of Kassel station, slow and heavy, the landscape sliding into shadow. The rain eased but left behind mist that wrapped around the trees like smoke. The countryside slept, unaware or unwilling to wake. Inside the boxcars, all was silent now. The singing had stopped. Inside the boxcars, all was silent now. The singing had stopped. Hours passed in the steady rhythm of wheels on rail, a sound both hypnotic and damning. Otto sat by the narrow window of the cabin, watching fields roll by under the ghostly glow of the moon. His reflection stared back, pale, drawn, older than he remembered. Every now and then, he thought he saw faces in the fog outside, children or women watching from the edge of the woods, but when he blinked they were gone. At 3 a.m., the train slowed near a junction. The engineer muttered something about a signal fault. Otto stepped down into the cold air. The world was silent except for the faint hum of the engine. Then he heard it again, that same lullaby, faint but clear, drifting from one of the boxcars. The melody was slow, mournful, yet strangely familiar, as if he had heard it once long ago. He walked toward the sound, boots crunching on gravel. The car was sealed, but through a narrow gap in the wood, he saw a sliver of movement, a hand, pale and trembling, clutching something small. Then a whisper came, not louder than the wind. A woman's voice, weary but calm. "Bit. Wasser. Please, water." He froze. Training told him to ignore it. Orders told him to move on. But something older, quieter, something human, stirred beneath the weight of his uniform. He took out his canteen, hesitated, then unscrewed the cap and poured a trickle through the gap. The hand received it, trembling. A few seconds later, a whisper came again, this time softer. "Danke." Otto stood there for a long moment, his breath shallow, the fog curling around him like smoke. Then he turned and walked back toward the engine. When he looked once more at the car, he saw a faint face behind the slats, a child, maybe 10 or 11, eyes wide and unblinking. For an instant, Otto saw another face overlaid on it, his own son's, smiling beneath summer sunlight years ago, waving from a train platform as the whistle blew and the world was still whole. He stumbled back, heart pounding. The child's face vanished. Only the fog remained. The mist grew thicker as the train rumbled east, swallowing the rails and the landscape alike until all that remained was sound and vibration, the long rhythmic groan of metal over metal and the muted hiss of the engine breathing in the dark. Otto sat rigid in his seat, his gloved hands resting on his knees, eyes unfocused as the countryside blurred by. Every sound now felt louder than it should be, every echo sharper, as if the night itself listened. The lullaby still lingered in his mind, circling him like a memory that refused to die. The engineer, whose name Otto had forgotten though they had shared 2 previous journeys, cleared his throat softly. "Bad weather ahead," he said, not looking up from the gauges. "Fog over the river valley. We'll need to slow before the bridge." Otto nodded absently, still staring out the small window. "Slow, yes. But do not stop. Orders are clear." The man gave a thin smile, one that wasn't really a smile at all. "Orders are always clear, Herr Hauptmann. It's the reasons that are not." Otto said nothing. He could feel the old man's words settle into the silence like a stone sinking into deep water. The rhythm of the rails took over again, steady and cruel, a reminder of how far from home they already were. When dawn finally crept into the sky, it came weak and colorless. The fields were shrouded in mist, and trees rose out of it like skeletons. Otto stepped out onto the small platform between the cars, letting the cold air slap his face awake. His breath came in white bursts. The countryside was still asleep, and he wondered how many towns they had passed unnoticed, how many stations stood empty because the world had learned not to ask questions about trains that traveled at night. He walked the length of the cars, boots thudding against the wood. Guards stood at intervals, rifles slung, faces gray with fatigue. One of them, a young corporal, saluted stiffly as Otto approached. "Morning, sir." "Morning," Otto replied. His voice came out hoarse. "All quiet?" The soldier hesitated, glancing at the car behind him. "Mostly, sir. Some coughing earlier. And, someone's been knocking on the wall. Slow, like tapping." Otto frowned. "Signaling?" "Could be," the man said, then lowered his voice. "Or just trying to remind us they're still alive." Otto's stomach turned. He dismissed the soldier with a nod and moved on, his eyes tracing the endless line of iron and wood. He could feel the weight of the human cargo behind those walls. The faint scuff of movement. A muffled sob. Then silence again. Always silence. At the rear car, he paused. A crow had landed on the roof, pecking at something frozen there, its feathers slick from the rain. It lifted its head to look at him, unafraid, then flew off into the fog. He watched it vanish, wishing he could go with it, far from the rails, far from the sound of the wheels that seemed to beat like a slow heart. When he returned to the engine, the old man handed him a tin cup of bitter coffee. "We'll make the bridge soon," he said. "You'll want to see it. The mist there never lifts. Locals call it the Valley of Ghosts." Otto managed a faint smile. A fitting name. The bridge appeared like a shadow over the river, a great steel skeleton stretching into the mist. As they crossed, the sound changed, hollow and echoing, a deep metallic hum that vibrated through the floorboards. Otto leaned out the window and looked down. The river was a dark ribbon far below, moving slow and silent beneath them. For a moment, he thought he saw figures in the water, shapes drifting just below the surface, pale and still, but when he blinked, they were gone. Only the reflection of the train remained, breaking apart in ripples. Once across, the terrain grew wilder. Forests thick with pine, old stone farmhouses half collapsed, roads choked with mud and the ghosts of war. Now and then, they passed burned-out vehicles, tanks rusted and skeletal, reminders that the front had once rolled through here like a storm and left nothing living behind. Otto dozed briefly, lulled by the endless motion, but a jolt woke him. The train had slowed unexpectedly. He looked at the gauges, pressure steady, brakes engaged. The engineer cursed softly. "What's wrong?" Otto asked. "Signal down ahead," the old man said, squinting through the windshield. "Shouldn't be one here at all. Track's supposed to stay clear until Gorlitz." Otto leaned out and saw a red lamp flickering on the side of the track, half swallowed by fog. No station, no outpost, just the signal, glowing weakly like an eye in the mist. "I'll check it," Otto said, grabbing his coat. He climbed down, boots sinking into wet soil. The forest pressed close on both sides. The signal light clicked softly, the sound unnerving in the stillness. He approached and saw the metal casing cracked, wires exposed. It looked as though someone had tampered with it. Then he heard it again. The lullaby. Faint, coming from somewhere behind him. He turned, scanning the mist. Nothing. Only the dark shape of the train stretching into nothingness. But the song continued, clearer now. A woman's voice, slow and mournful, the same melody as before. It drifted between the trees, weaving through the fog like smoke. Otto's breath caught in his throat. He stepped forward, one hand on his pistol. "Who's there?" The singing stopped. Only the wind replied, whispering through the pines. He waited a moment longer, then exhaled and walked back toward the train. The signal was faulty, perhaps struck by lightning or tampered with by looters. That was the rational answer. But as he climbed back into the cabin, he felt the cold seep deeper into him, a cold that had nothing to do with weather. They moved again, slower now, the fog growing thicker. Otto tried to shake the unease, but it clung to him. The lullaby still echoed faintly in his mind, matching the rhythm of the wheels. Somewhere between the miles of track and the shrouded forests, the boundary between memory and the present began to blur. He thought of his wife, Anna, and the letters she had sent before the bombing of Kassel had taken their home. He thought of his son, Lucas, smiling on the station platform the day he left for the front. That same smile he had seen reflected in the eyes of the child through the slats of the boxcar. And then, as if the thought had summoned it, he heard something shift behind him. A faint scrape, a movement inside the nearest car. He stepped out again, the wind cutting across his face. The guards looked uneasy now. One pointed toward the fifth car. "Sir, listen." Otto leaned closer. Inside, there was whispering. Not one voice, but many, murmured prayers, words in a dozen tongues blending into one another. Then a soft thud. "What are they doing?" one guard muttered. Otto listened harder. The sound came again, rhythmic, slow. Not knocking this time, but tapping, steady, deliberate, almost musical. He counted the beats. 3, pause, 3, pause, 2. Then again. "Could be code," a guard said. Otto shook his head slowly. "No. It's too slow. Too careful." He pressed his ear to the wood. The tapping continued, faint but persistent. Then, suddenly, it stopped. Silence. And then, a whisper so close it could have been inches away, just beyond the wood. "Do you hear them too?" Otto stumbled back. The voice had been clear, unmistakable. A woman's voice, older now, hollow, as if it came from somewhere beyond time. "Who said that?" he demanded. No answer. Only the sound of the wheels grinding against the rails, the fog pressing close, and the train that kept moving forward into nowhere. He looked down at his gloves. They were trembling. When he glanced once more at the boxcar, he thought he saw shadows moving behind the slats, faces, dozens of them, pale and half-formed, staring back at him through the mist. He blinked, and they were gone. But the lullaby started again. This time, it came from inside his head. The fog never lifted. It only grew denser, wrapping itself around the train like a shroud, turning the morning into a gray half-light that neither rose nor fell. The world outside had vanished entirely, and the tracks ahead disappeared into whiteness, as though the train itself was being swallowed by nothingness. The sound of the engine was now the only heartbeat left in existence, pounding steady, steady, forward into a place no one could name. Otto stood beside the engineer, eyes hollow, every nerve in his body wound tight. He could no longer tell how long they had been traveling, hours, perhaps days. The world had become an unbroken rhythm of motion and whispers, the soft voices of the unseen within the boxcars blending with the drone of the wheels. He hadn't slept, hadn't spoken. The voices had followed him since the night before, curling through his thoughts like tendrils of smoke. He knew now they were not tricks of sound. They were something else, something older, deeper, born from what the world had chosen to forget. The old engineer glanced at him nervously. "Sir, this fog. I've run this line 20 years, never seen it so thick." Otto didn't reply. His hands gripped the edge of the control panel, knuckles pale. There was something strange in the air, an absence of distance. The landscape, when it appeared at all through gaps in the mist, was wrong, hills where there should be plains, stretches of track that seemed unfamiliar. At one point he thought he saw a burnt-out village that hadn't been there before, the charred remains of houses flickering like memories. And then, from somewhere behind them, came a sound, a door clanging, followed by a low cry that was not quite human. Otto's pulse quickened. "Stop the train," he said quietly. The engineer hesitated. "Sir, we have orders." "Stop it." The brakes screamed, the metal grinding in protest, and the train shuddered to a halt. The silence that followed was immense. Even the fog seemed to pause, listening. Otto stepped down onto the ground, the gravel wet beneath his boots, the air thick and metallic, as though it carried the taste of blood. He walked toward the rear of the train. Each car loomed like a coffin, iron-bound and cold, breathing faint wisps of vapor through the gaps. The guards had gathered there already, uneasy and pale. One saluted shakily. "Sir, we heard something moving inside." "Like?" "Open it," Otto said. The man blinked. "Sir. We're not authorized." "I said open it." They fumbled with the latch, the metal stiff from cold and rust. The door slid with a shriek that echoed through the trees, cutting into the silence. For a moment, the fog drifted inside, curling along the floor of the car like mist spilling into a tomb. And then Otto saw them. Not the faces he expected, not the living. They were shapes more than people, silhouettes in tattered clothing, eyes hollow but bright with something that was not light. The air around them shimmered faintly, as though they were half there, half memory. Some stood, some sat against the walls, some cradled the small still shapes of children in their arms. Their lips moved, whispering words that had no sound. The guards stumbled back, crossing themselves. Otto could not move. His throat felt dry, his heart hammering against his ribs. He knew these faces, not their names, but their truth. The missing, the taken, the ones whose voices had filled the night. And at the front of them stood a woman. Her eyes were dark and endless, her hair matted with frost. She looked at Otto as though she had known him all her life. And when she spoke, the sound came not through his ears, but through the marrow of his bones. "You heard us," she said. "And still you came." Otto took a step forward. "What are you?" "What remains," she said. "Of what was done, of what was carried on your rails, of what you chose not to see." Her gaze didn't waver. "We have been traveling a long time." Otto's breath came uneven. "You're not real." Her expression softened. "And yet, we are all that is real now." The air turned colder. Frost began to form on the metal, spreading like veins of white across the train's surface. The guards backed away, muttering prayers, their rifles shaking. The old engineer called out from the cabin, his voice distant, panicked. "Sir, we can't stay here." But Otto couldn't move. The woman stepped closer, and the fog seemed to move with her. "You carried us," she whispered. "Not just this night. You and all the others. We were names on paper. Numbers on manifests. Cargo. You wrote it, you signed it, and the wheels turned, and the world forgot our faces." Otto shook his head, but her words tore through him like shrapnel. "I didn't know," he said, the words breaking as they left him. "I didn't." "You knew enough," she said gently. And that was all it took. Behind her, the others began to hum again. That same lullaby. The sound rose, soft but vast, filling the air, filling the forest, until even the wind seemed to hush. Otto fell to his knees, his breath clouding in front of him. He pressed his hands to his ears, but the sound was inside him now, woven into his heartbeat, into the rhythm of the train itself. Then, silence. When he looked up, the car was empty. Only darkness remained inside. The frost on the metal was melting, running down in thin streams like tears. The guards were gone too. Their footprints vanished into the mist. Only Otto and the train remained. He stood slowly, every movement heavy. The fog shifted, revealing the forest beyond. But something was wrong. The trees were not trees anymore, they were blackened, twisted, their branches bare. Ash covered the ground like snow. The air smelled of smoke, of iron, of old death. Otto realized where he was. The train had stopped before a wide-open clearing, lined with broken fences and half-collapsed watchtowers. A sign hung askew on one post, the letters faded but still visible. He couldn't read it at first, the edges blurred, but then the words came into focus, and his blood turned to ice. He had heard of this place. All of Germany had, though no one spoke of it aloud. The name was whispered like a curse, a place erased from maps but not from memory. The train had brought him to the end of its line. He walked forward through the ash, each step sinking deeper, the ground soft and cold beneath his boots. The world was silent except for the distant hum of the idle engine. He passed the remnants of barracks, they were blackened and crumbling, and the faint outlines of footprints that led nowhere. Then, faintly, he saw movement ahead. A figure standing among the ruins. A boy, maybe 11, pale and thin, dressed in clothes far too large for him. The same boy he had seen through the slats. The same eyes, dark and unblinking. Otto froze. The boy tilted his head slightly, studying him. Then he smiled, not with warmth, but with sadness, the kind that holds more understanding than a lifetime of words. "You brought us here," the boy said softly. Otto's breath caught. "I didn't mean to." The boy looked past him at the train. They all said that. A gust of wind swept through, stirring the ash into the air. The boy's outline flickered, almost fading. Otto stepped closer, desperate. "What do you want from me?" The boy's eyes glimmered. "To remember." The word hung in the air, heavier than anything Otto had ever carried. He sank to his knees, the weight of it pressing down like the whole sky had fallen upon him. He remembered everything then. The papers he had signed. The trains he had overseen. The nights he had convinced himself that ignorance was innocence. The lullabies he had ignored. And above it all, the face of his son, smiling at the station, waving goodbye as the whistle blew. Tears cut through the dirt on his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. The boy nodded, as though he had been waiting for that. Behind him, the fog began to lift. The sun broke faintly through, thin and pale, casting light over the clearing. For the first time, Otto could see the full expanse of it, the fences stretching into distance, the endless rails that led nowhere, and the ghosts standing along them, silent, watching. One by one, they began to fade into the light, the boy last of all. Before he vanished, he spoke again, his voice quiet and kind. "The train must stop, Herr Hauptmann." And then he was gone. Otto stood alone. The wind carried only silence now. He turned toward the engine, its great black form gleaming faintly under the weak sun. The door to the cabin hung open. Inside, the controls waited, steam still whispering from the vents. He climbed in, his movements calm, almost peaceful. He sat in the driver's seat, hands resting on the levers, eyes fixed on the empty tracks ahead. He thought of Anna. Of Lucas. Of all the names without faces. He reached for the throttle, and instead of pulling it forward, he eased it back. The engine groaned, reversing slowly, the wheels squealing in protest. The train began to roll backward, away from the clearing, away from the ghosts, away from the line that had led only to silence. As it moved, the fog began to close in again, soft and forgiving. When the train reached the bridge, the one the engineer had called the Valley of Ghosts, Otto stopped it in the center. The river below shimmered like liquid glass. He stepped down onto the narrow walkway, the wind tugging at his coat. For a long time, he stood there, staring into the water. He could see his reflection, faint and broken by ripples. But beneath it, he thought he saw other faces too, the woman, the child, the boy. They looked up at him, calm, waiting. Otto closed his eyes. The whistle blew once, long and low, echoing through the valley. Then the sound was gone. By the time the morning patrol found the train, it was empty. No guards, no passengers, no officer. The engine was still warm, the brakes locked, the tracks behind it unbroken. They searched the bridge, the forest, the riverbanks. They found only a single item lying near the railing, a folded piece of paper sealed in a damp envelope. It was a transport manifest. The same kind Otto had signed so many times before. But where the cargo list should have been, there were only words written in careful, fading ink. The train has reached its destination. No more departures. They said the fog never left that stretch of rail again. Some nights, villagers swore they heard a whistle echoing through the valley, long after the last trains had stopped running. They said if you listened closely, you could hear singing in the mist, soft and distant, like a lullaby carried on the wind. And sometimes, if the night was still enough, you could almost hear another sound beneath it. Wheels turning slowly, endlessly, on a line that led nowhere. The train that never arrived. The train that never truly stopped. The train to nowhere.